they're our neighbors.
Anybody else?
Yes, Mayor, may I have the floor?
You have the floor.
I already made my position on this pretty clear. We're selling it for roughly 17% of what it's worth. I'm also troubled to hear that they're already spending money on it before we sold it, but that's, I guess we can come back to that some other time. But yeah, we're selling it for 17% of what it's worth, so I still don't support this.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, if no other discussion, whenever our clerk is ready to call for the roll.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Mrs. Spletzer?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
No.
Mrs. Stimpert?
Abstain. Sorry, abstain.
And Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance passes. Okay, under new business, resolution 39-2022.
Mayor, you skipped 22-38.
Oh, yeah?
22-18, sir. I mean, 38.
Yeah, you're right, I checked it off ahead of time. I was testing.
Sorry,
you guys. Okay, ordinance 2022-38, an ordinance establishing section 121.06 of the Administrative Code pertaining to the sale or disposal of municipal personal property. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Granchi, do we have a second? Ms. Stimpert, any discussion?
Spletzer?
That's right. Any discussion? Okay. If no discussion, whenever the clerk is ready to call for the roll.
Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Mrs. Spletzer?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
Mrs. Stimpert?
Yes.
All right, ordinance passes. All right, I'll try to get myself together here. New business, resolution 39-2022, if the clerk wants to go ahead and read.
A resolution in support of the Salute to Our Veterans event, celebrating the 80th anniversary of the dedication of the Newton Falls Community Center, a historic USO.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay,
I'll
Mr.
second.
Granchi and Ms. Spletzer. Okay, any discussion?
Yes, Mayor, may I have the floor?
You have the floor.
I just want to thank Heritage Court for putting this on. I'm obviously very excited about it. Anything I can do to help them out, just let me know.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, if no other discussion, whenever the clerk is ready to call for the roll.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Mrs. Spletzer?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
Mrs. Stimpert?
Yes.
Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Okay, passes. Resolution 40-2022. Whenever the clerk is ready to read.
Resolution 40-2022, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a real property donation agreement with Newton Falls DOHP LLC.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Make that motion.
Mr. Bariak, do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Federoff, any discussion?
Yes, if I could have the floor.
You have the floor.
I'm going to say a couple words here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the city manager if she'd like to comment more on it. This is the property behind the new Dollar General store. There's a little road that goes down to the river. On the right side is our big sewer plant, whatever you call it. We just put in a few years ago. This is the land right across the street. Would you like to go further with that, Mrs. Purdy, and tell them how this all transpired, please?
Yes, as I had mentioned previously about Dollar General, the gentleman had approached me. This company buys land and then builds Dollar General stores on behalf of Dollar General, and then he leases them the stores. Well, when they bought the property all the way down to the river, and they find themselves not in need of that 1.5 acre property. So I asked him if he would be willing to donate it back to the city, and he said yes. So this agreement is with them to donate that property back to the city.
Is it true, Mrs. Purdy, that he wanted to sell it to us?
Yes, he originally wanted to sell it to us for $15,000, and I
And
said,
we told him we didn't have the money, and.
Right, and
if
asked
he'd be
him-
willing to donate it, that would.
yes, so I asked him if he'd be willing to donate it, and he did. So it's a company that actually owns Dollar General stores, and they lease them back to Dollar General.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. I can say that it's a good place for a baptism. I've done a couple of those there, just, if anybody wants baptized. Anybody want to first address before I give Mr. Bariak a second? If not, Mr. Bariak, you have the floor.
The only thing I'd like to add to that is that we don't know in the future, we may need that land to expand our sewer, make a park. It's not hurting anything. Well, it's worth the price, free. So it's not costing the taxpayers a dime. Thank you.
I think we'll all agree on that. Whenever the clerk is ready to call for the roll.
Ms. Spletzer?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
Ms. Stimpert?
Yes.
Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Okay, resolution passes. Ordinance 2022-42, whenever the clerk is ready to read.
Ordinance 2022-42, an ordinance replacing Chapter 1151 of the zoning code relating to signs.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Granchi, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bariak, any discussion?
Yes, Mayor, may I have the floor?
You have the floor.
So this ordinance, Mr. Bryan and I worked together on to bring our zoning code ordinances regarding signs up to what the First Amendment has already been established through the Supreme Court. So this just keeps it in line with the First Amendment, making sure that we're all kosher and that we don't have any unconstitutional provisions or ordinances or any codes in there that would be considered unconstitutional.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes. I may have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can pass it tonight, there might need tweaked a little bit, it's gonna go to committee, is that right, sir, Mr. Granchi?
Yeah, I plan to bring it to
It's
them.
gonna go to the committee and then we can tweak it or whatever, but this is a way to, move this forward, which we've needed.
Okay, Mr. Federoff, would you?
Yeah, it's quite lengthy. It brings us in line with the Ohio Revised Code. It's no longer just a he said, she said, and we really don't know what the interpretation of some of the common languages are. This right here spells it out. It defines what we're talking about when we describe a particular sign. Just like the Ohio Revised Code, every word in there means something, and this is the way it's written up. If you say it's a canopy sign, we can look up, we know exactly what a canopy sign is. This is something we've needed for quite a while. I think it will eliminate a lot of Facebook chatter, whatever, as to where it'll spell it out. One thing I particularly liked about it is there's a penalty section. And it wasn't, okay, who do you know as to what's happening? You know, no. It actually has a penalty section in there, whether it's a sign by an individual or a sign by a corporation. You know, there's two different entities there. And it spells it out very well. I think it'll lead us quite well into the future. Like I say, some things need tweaked, but I think as long as we follow this, we won't be on the Tribune front page near as often. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, whenever the clerk is ready to call for the roll.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
Ms. Stimpert?
Yes.
Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Ms. Spletzer?
Yes.
All right, ordinance passes. Ordinance 2022-43, whenever the clerk is ready to read.
Ordinance 2022-43, an ordinance amending sections 1149.02 and 1149.03 of the zoning code relating to residential addiction services for treatment facilities and houses.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Boriak
Second.
and Mr. Greenachy seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor Rappaport?
Yes.
Mr. Bryan, this, just to clarify, this does fall in line with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're not going to end up getting dinged on anything with that passing this, correct?
No, it was written in compliance with the Ohio Revised Code provisions, so.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Boriak, did you want the floor?
Yes.
Okay.
This has been a hot button topic in this community for months. I'm going to let the law director bring everybody up on the speed with the major bullet points. One of the points is they're not going to sneak any of these little houses in. Would you comment on this, please, sir?
Sure.
The legislation.
Mr. Bariak, there was an existing provision in the codified ordinances that restricted larger facilities into the multifamily, industrial, or commercial areas of Newton Falls and talked about certain restrictions. This also requires licensing in single-family residential areas where we can't prohibit the operation of these types of facilities in single-family residential areas as long as there's no more than 5 residents of the facility. But these facilities have to be licensed by the state and meet certain requirements. So this requires these facilities to come to the city and get an occupancy permit, and we're just checking to make sure they meet the requirements, have the proper inspection from the state, the proper licensing from the state, and that they meet all other zoning codes like any other residential facility would need to meet before they can open. And then every year they have to just update their certificates and to show that the facility is licensed and they're not just opening and flouting the rules they have to abide by according to the state of Ohio. And then there's the multifamily section was updated just to add a few more of those requirements in there, and that's restricted to no more than 30 people in those zones unless they get additional approval for a larger facility. And the requirements are similar, and those larger facilities have to be located in multifamily, commercial, or industrial districts. You can't have facilities with over 5 people in single-family residential areas, and it also has requirements that it can't be any closer than a 500-foot radius from a school or another similar facility.
Excuse me, Mr. Bryan. If I could sum this up, it's going to stop them sneaking in overnight, right?
That's correct. We'll know
We're
where
going to
these
have any
facilities.
more, you wake up in the morning and next thing you know, you got something going on next door, you know. There's going to be a procedure, and at least we'll know about it. There's been some instances. We're going to try to do what we can do.
Any other discussion? Mr. Federoff, you want the floor?
Yeah, one thing that's important here, it exemplifies just how important zoning is. We have a zoning officer, but you're the one that lives in that neighborhood. You know what's going on until you open your mouth and get a hold of the zoning department and say, hey, I think this is going on. Doesn't mean you're a bad guy for saying, hey, I think this is going on. You're putting it in its proper position of having it investigated. It's your responsibility. You live there. It's your home. It's your neighborhood. It's your responsibility to bring it to the attention of the authorities. It's simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, if not, whenever the clerk is ready to call for the roll.
Mrs. Stemper?
Yes.
Mr. Federal?
Yes.
Mr. Bariak?
Yes.
Mrs. Spletzer?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
All right. Ordinance passes. Ordinance 2022-44, whenever the clerk is ready to call.
Ordinance 2022-44, an ordinance declaring in the event the 2022 police tax levy is approved by the electorate, council's intent to authorize appropriations in the 2023 police budget beyond the funds generated by the police levy that equates to not less than 85% of the fiscal year 2022 police department operating expenditures.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Granchi, do we have a second? Ms.
Mayor?
Spletzer, Mr. Boriak, you wanted the floor?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Granchi tonight, sir, why did you sponsor this legislation? Could you give me a reasoning?
Because between Brad and I wrote it.
Because what?
Between Brad and I wrote it.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes, Mayor, you have the floor.
Mr. Federal?
My question is, why the 85%? Why don't we just make that 100%? Can we amend that to 100%? I think that would make it more equitable, and I think that people would be able to see exactly what's going on. There's nobody trying to pull something or anything, but I think if we made it 100% would be
Mayor, may I
more
answer?
reflective of what would be necessary.
Mr. Granchi, you have the floor.
I wanted to do 100%. I was advised by both Brad and Sean that we should not go full with that just because of how much a budget can ebb and flow year to year. So it's not advisable to commit the exact same amount from year to year. So there should be a buffer for emergencies, for anything like that. That's the only reason why it's not at 100%. I was advised by our experts on our administration that we should not do 100%. But I was just intending to answer, but since I had the floor, this is, the entire purpose of this is, say if we'll use arbitrary numbers, if we are going to generate 200,000 from the levy, this is saying that you cannot take 200,000 that was previously allocated to the police department and take that away, because the only amount that's earmarked is that 200,000. What this will ensure is that there's going to be no sleight of hand, there's going to be no, basically anything shady that will happen with it. It will ensure that the amount of money that the police department is currently getting will not be reduced by more than 15%, so that the amount generated by the levy will truly boost the police department, and there won't be any, like I said, any sleight of hand. You're not just going to move anything arbitrarily into the general fund. And I truly, truly believe that passing this is the only way that we have a prayer of passing this levy.
Mr. Barth, before you get a second, just let me see if Mrs. Stemper or Spletzer wanted it first.
I've had that question, just asked the question and then he took over. That's all right, I'll wait.
Okay, did either one of you want to first address?
I just want to say, having him explain that further, from what I read, I feel like this will definitely help support getting a police levy passed.
The only thing I'm going to say is that I commend you for doing this, because I think it is one step closer towards helping us at least get the levy passed, because we do desperately need it. One of the things it was my understanding that passing this levy by the community is simply a matter of taking the place of the ARPA funds that were funding the police department for the past 2 years. So and then my other concern was, that this is more of an administrative, the budget stuff should be handled by the city manager and the finance director, but, if this alleviates the public's concern of money being changed around too much in the budget, then I'm all for this. I am going to support this.
Mr. Boriak, did you want a second address?
Yes. Look, I want to amend this right now. I'd like to put a motion on the amendment. I think we can improve on this. Our intent for the general fund should be 100% of what is budgeted for this year. I don't know about Mr. Sean's 85, but I think we ought to, if we're going to be straight up with the people, we ought to go 100%. I want to ask if I can put a motion to amend this.
I mean, we could, but while we're on discussion,
Okay.
if you want to let Sean weigh in for a moment, and then,
I would, and Mr. Grantchett, I think this is a great piece of legislation, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. I agree. I think 100%. I think the intent should be 100%.
Deal. Let's do it.
And Mayor, if I can say something, I have no problem with the 100%. When Sean and I work on the budget, I have no problem with the 100%, and I think it should be 100%.
okay. All right, does somebody want to?
I second that motion to amend.
Okay, Mr. Boriak.
I made that motion. Are you seconding that?
I seconded it.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Boriak is making a motion to amend this ordinance to state 100% instead of 85%. And Mr. Granchi is seconding that. Is there any discussion on amending this motion?
Could I just,
think
yes,
that's-
may I add?
Yes.
I would, that the general fund be budgeted at 100%.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I make the motion the general fund be budgeted at 100%
Right.
for this year.
I think that makes it more transparent.
Yeah, it makes it more transparent.
Is there any discussion on the amendment itself amongst you? Okay.
The reason I thought about it, or we talked about it at the beginning, is it declares in this section 1, it says, here, council herein declares its intent is to support the police department, get as much money as we can to them, and I think it only makes sense to go with John's recommendation.
Let's call for the roll, and that will be to have it amended, and then we'll have to make
Yeah.
the motion to go with it. So whenever the clerk wants to call for the roll, and that's to amend the ordinance. If you're squared away with your paperwork, you good?
Mrs. Swenson?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemper?
Yes.
Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Mr. Boriak?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance is amended as stated. Now, I believe we have to make another motion now to discuss and vote on the amended ordinance. So do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Boriak made the motion.
Second.
Ms. Spletzer seconded. Do we have any discussion on the amended ordinance?
Yes, Mayor.
Mr. Grant, you have the floor.
Just so that people are aware, this is something I'm actually working on. I'd like to have this for any emergency service levy going forward for the rest of time. That if we are ever going to have a levy for an emergency service, that it should always be supplemental to existing funding rather than being able to replace it arbitrarily at any time. So that is something that's on the horizon.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, if not, whenever our clerk's ready to call for the roll.
Mr. Federoff?
Yes.
Mr. Boriak?
Yes.
Mrs. Swenson?
Yes.
Mr. Granchi?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemper?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance passes, and the last bit of legislation is the addition. It's a motion to have trick or treat this year on Saturday, October 22nd from 4 to 6 p.m.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Or it's a motion to have trick or treat this year on Saturday, October 22nd from 4 o'clock to 6
Thought it was
o'clock.
the 29th.
29th. That's why I'm glad I stopped.
Let me make sure.
I didn't think it sounded right.
Thought it was the 29th.
The 29th, I think.
Yeah, I wrote down, you said the 29th earlier.
Did I really? I have it written down the 22nd, so let me
The cakewalk is the 29th also.
Yeah, it's the 29th. It's the 29th.
It's a Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday, October 29th, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second,
Okay, Mrs. Stempert made the motion, Mr. Bariak seconded. Do we have any discussion? Okay, if no discussion, whenever Mr. Combs is ready to call for the roll.
Ms. Simper,
Yes.
Mr. Federoff,
Yes.
Mr. Mariak,
yes.
Ms. Swetzer,
Yes.
Mr. Grant.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Public comments open to non-agenda items. Give your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Brenda Rosina, 226 Oak Knoll. I have something very important to bring up that I don't think a lot of you are aware of. I have recently tried to reach out and call the intern chief. I've done so and have proof on my phone, a total of 6 times. Each time you go through the little number thing and it says press 2 and you press 2. And lo and behold, the phone rings and rings and rings and rings. And guess who answers? Chief Bixler's voice message as, "This is Chief Bixler, Newton Falls Police Chief." I don't bother leaving a message because I know he's not the chief here in Newton Falls anymore. That's a problem. I think that's a big major problem. When I call the chief, interim chief, whoever, and I'm instructed to press 2, I would think that would lead up to the phone number of the interim chief. That's problem number 1. Why me, who else am I trying to reach out to the chief? Well, you guys are living during the day, this interim chief is not there. I have a problem, and it's a big one. Big problem. He works nights. I'm told if I want to meet with the chief, I go up to the police station when he's on hours. I can't do that. I cannot get out of my house at 10 o'clock at night to go up to sit down and have a meeting or a little sit-down talk with the interim chief. I am taking care of 2 grandkids at home. I do not drive. I'm not taking my scooter out past dark to talk with somebody. That was problem number 2. Problem number 3, here it goes. Ready? On August 15th at 16:45, my grandson was hit by a truck. Hit and run. Took off. That's a big problem. And here's why. I finally got a copy of the report. Now, this happened in East River Garden. This report in this report, the officer, who, by the way, is not from Newton Falls, part-time cop out of Aurora, claims there was a possible injury. Possible. That's okay. You get there to see the child. Right away, she asked the child, "Well, I was sitting at the park, why didn't you come get me?" The child was hit by a truck. Hit by a truck. From the back, blown over the handlebars, and you're gonna ask this child, for 1, is in shock. 2, adrenaline's pumping. Why didn't you come to the park to let me know you were hit by a truck? That's a problem. In this report,
Ms. Christina, you have to wrap up your time.
I'm trying to wrap this up. This is important.
I mean, they all.
Because I want this investigated. It stopped on August 15th. Nothing went any farther. In here it claims there's no video. Guess what? The truck was captured on video. In here, in the report, there's no witness names. Guess what? There's witnesses. Where are the names? Why does it say there's no video when 3 witnesses said the neighbor came running down the street and said, hey, I got it on my ring cam, it's on video. It's a red truck, tinted windows, Ford Ranger, with party plates. The child stated what the truck looked like with party plates. Now here's my major question.
Okay, well, you have to wrap up, but it's a 3-minute.
We know it's a red truck, 4 doors, tinted windows with party plates. The investigation stopped. Why can we not request OSP to run party plates out of Portage County, because this truck has been in and out of town and seen numerous times. I want this investigated. I want it thoroughly investigated. I want answers, and I don't want it. I'm sorry if I'm upset about this, but how would you feel if that was your daughter, your son, your grandson, or your granddaughter? How would you feel? Would you want it investigated? Not just one day thrown away, and then told, well, we can't do that because we don't have identification of the driver. Here's my question. What would you do if it was a homicide? Don't throw your hands up in the air and say, well, we can't, run a plate through OSP because we don't know who the driver is. Got a problem with that. And don't blame it on the skeleton crew, and don't blame it on we need a
Okay,
levy.
I understand. Anybody else?
Steve Simpson, 420 Ravenna Road. I'm here tonight on behalf of Heritage Board, and I would like to thank council for your resolution tonight, supporting us in the celebration that is scheduled to take place on November 5th. I would like to urge everyone to watch our website over the next week or so, and there'll be a detailed description of the events that we have planned to take place. I don't want to let any cats out of the bag here tonight, but all I can tell you is it is going to be a lot of fun. It is going to be absolutely fantastic. So just keep an eye on our website, Heritage Board, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or Connie at any time. Thank you very much. Thank you tonight. What was that again?
Jamie Klein, 34 Ridge Road. I'm here to talk about something that happened after the last council meeting, and to bring it to light. I was called by my maiden name by Councilman Moran, and it was brought to me that I'm being investigated by you. You're having people look me up and find dirt on me. All I gotta say is if any one of you guys have any questions, I ain't got shit myself to hide.
Yeah, you can't talk like that, just.
I taught myself. I don't have anything to hide. I don't hide behind no fake name on Facebook that I was accused of. I don't hide behind no, whatever it is, where you hide your name or not, and then, whatever, anonymous. I don't hide behind that. I ain't got nothing to hide. If you want something, if you want to know something about me, you know where I live. You've been to my house. You know my family. Come ask me. I have nothing to hide. And call your goons off and tell them to quit searching people. Because the same person you're having search people was standing at this podium complaining about being lynched, doing the same thing.
Anybody else?
Adam Zimmerman, 515 May Avenue. I'm going to touch on something that was voted on last meeting. I'm sure everyone up here remembers it. The motion from Mr. Ganchi to allow city committees and other groups to use council chambers. Does anyone remember the outcome of that vote? Anybody? I do. It failed 3-2. Mr. Bariak, Mr. Federoff, and Ms. Fletcher. You voted against that motion to allow city committees and other groups to use council chambers. And what's happened since then? We've had 2 meetings in here, attended by the councilman that voted no. Why is that? The Parks and Rec meeting, Mr. Federoff, you were there, Ms. Fletcher, you were there, the city manager, you were there. You claim to not even know how council voted at that meeting. How can we be back a week and a half from vacation and not know how council voted on something that affects how you're holding meetings and something that they said you couldn't do? Did you disregard the vote, or did you not know? Same thing with you, Ms. Fletcher, Mr. Federoff. It was brought to your attention at that meeting. Mr. Federoff, you claim to not even have voted on it. You said twice, I did not vote on that. Yes. Yes, you did. Thank you. Now, explain what that means.
Yep.
What does that mean, sir?
He's not going to discuss back and forth. You're not going to have a back and forth discussion. You use your time.
I just was curious about what that gesture meant.
What's that?
I was curious about what that gesture meant. I was hoping that would be next.
When he has his closing remarks, he'll let you know what his gesture
Well, I'm
means.
looking forward to that.
Makes you happy. Okay, me too.
And now also what happens past week with guns and hoses. You know, due to this debacle going on here, we've already had business publicly say that they are moving away from Newton Falls. They have not opened up business here and moved elsewhere because of what has happened with the permitting for guns and hoses. Our city manager is proving over and over again that she is in over her head. When are you going to start to listen to people? Start to hear people. You've made a mistake. Let's start to own up to it. Something that was said tonight, Mr. Bariak, you said that the fire district has spent $22,000 to repair a car they haven't even received yet. How can that happen? For $2,200, excuse me. Hasn't even been sold yet. Yet you know how much it needs in repairs by them? Curious on that. And we also heard that the school is paying us $114,000 for 2 resource officers. That we can supply that. But I hope our 2 officers are making at least $57,000. I hope we're not making a profit off of the school. Thank you.
Julie Williams, 610 Irish Road. I'm glad for the zoning and regulational for sober houses. I do believe there needs to be balance. But I can also tell you that I know some of the people who contribute to our community. I know somebody who just celebrated a year of sobriety. She's a wonderful person. She works 2 jobs.